Hello, y'all. I am Kaydub0415, and welcome to Basic Buddhism with Kaydub. So, last week we talked about impermanence, that the world and the phenomena within the world, including human beings, are transitory, impermanent, ever changing, dynamic, as opposed to static. And that was the first mark of existence in Buddhist teachings. The second The second mark is very much connected to the first, and it is the central core of Buddhism and what a Buddhist practitioner is practicing for, which is dukkha. And we've talked about dukkha before. The first week, that being the central issue of Buddhism, is we're concerned about dukkha, suffering, unsatisfactoriness, are two translations of that word. And that is the primary focus of the Buddhist practice. Seeing dukkha and eventually eliminating dukkha at its root. Now, that's not very easy for a layperson because we have all sorts of concerns. As a monk, it becomes a little bit easier because it's your basic concern, with the exception of making sure you get food, water, and don't kill things. Your primary focus is the Dharma and practicing the Dharma, even while you're sweeping the temple floor. Your primary focus is focusing on the Dharma, the teachings, and applying those teachings. So the Buddhist argument is since all things that are created are transitory, those things are, at their inner core, if there were such a thing, a source of dukkha. So, why would a practicing Buddhist, the Buddha himself, say something like that? So, we're going to get into that in 1 second. But I'm gonna completely neglect the chanting. Let's not do that. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. All right, so what is this whole thing about? Inherently, these phenomena, these things, these objects are dukkha. All right, so this is where the brain sort of needs to be fired up to sort of understand this idea. So, because the object is impermanent, it is dukkha. It is a source of dukkha, is the argument, because to its core, it's impermanent. Therefore, it cannot contribute toward a lasting happiness. And we know this as human beings. We are totally aware of this as human beings, but sometimes it gets lost, sort of in translation at times. I'll give you an example. People will say, oh, well, I'm happy when I'm drinking my favorite drink. So in this case, let's say lemon lime, Clover Valley flavored sparkling water is your favorite drink, just as an example. But here's the thing: when it's all gone and you're still thirsty, you're gonna still want more, right? That's dukkha. It Yes, you could argue it's a basic biological need, but trust me, if I drink that whole thing down, I'm probably not going to be thirsty, but I might still be thirsty for more. And that is dukkha. It's transitory. There's a limited amount here, and if even if I controlled all the factors of production that produce this object, I would run out of resources because the resources are impermanent. They're not going to last forever, and they are not going to be in the same quantity forever. This is something we need to learn about fossil fuels, in my opinion. Something that we can take into our everyday lives is those things are impermanent. They're changing. The oil that you get into your car is not the same oil that came out of the pipe. Just letting you know that. So it's really a central core that those two links Those two marks of existence are very much interconnected with each other. If it's not impermanent, it could possibly be a source of sukha, otherwise known as happiness, to us. But since something is impermanent, it cannot be a lasting source of sukha or happiness. It's more like a lasting source of dukkha. We just don't acknowledge it in the experience. For example, when I do take a swig of this, and I'm going to take a swig because my throat is dry. So I'm going to take a swig and I'm going to tell you what the experience is like. So that is a very pleasant experience, right? I'm drinking one of my favorite drinks on this planet, and the cap fell on the floor. I'm not going to bother going to get it right now. One of my favorite drinks on the face of planet Earth, I was drinking that. But the pleasure didn't last. After I stopped drinking it, the pleasure is sort of gone. Now I'm sort of thirsty again, and I would like some more. But I also need to talk, and so now I have a conflict here. I have dukkha because I want to drink more, but I also have dukkha because I need to finish this talk. It can't last forever. And if it did, I'd probably drop dead because I could be talking about this for a long time. But we have a program and we need to stick to it. So those two are very interlinked, that being impermanence and dukkha. And that's going to really get tied together when we look at this sort of the kinds or branches of dukkha. And so Lions Roar had a decent little tidbit about three three types of suffering, sorry, into the field of vision, not out of the field of vision. The suffering of suffering, that is related to birth, aging, illness, and death. Those are readily apparent right in front of our eyes, but sometimes we don't really see that either. Uh, we can observe cells being destroyed and then being replaced, but not with the naked eye. So we can't look at a person and see, oh, well, their cells are being, you know, are dying and then they're being replaced. We can't really see that with the naked eye, so it's something that can be overlooked fairly easily if we cannot it's not readily perceived by any of our senses. Same thing with, a taste. Someone could say Burger King and I can, taste it in my mouth, right? But that's dukkha because it's definitely transitory and it's also in my head. It's just an idea. Ideas are impermanent as well. They're created in our brains or they are put into our brain by the media or other people. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying that it sort of happens. So the suffering of suffering are those sort of changes. Something arises, that's birth. Something ages, your car, for example. um, Something gets ill. It could be yourself, or the oil needs to be changed in your car. It could be considered an illness if you have a car. And death. Ultimately, the passing away of a human being. Your car is just completely expired. It's on its last legs, and it dies basically. And everyone and their mother is telling you need to buy a new car. Unfortunately, we can't really buy a new body or a new brain or anything like that. I mean, we got transplants and stuff, but for those vital organs, that'd be very difficult. So you could try, but even if you did, death is right there. It's going to happen. And the argument goes that there's actually birth and death every second that we're alive, like those cells that die and then they're replaced. So the argument goes that rebirth sort of happens every single second. Same thing with our perception. It's a second by second process. I see erasers on my desk, and if I stare at that for a very long time, I'm just going to see those erasers. And that's my brain saying there are erasers there. But in reality, my brain is seeing what is a second by second phenomena. Uh, Probably less than second by second because the senses and the signals from the sense organ to the brain are very fast. So it's a momentary process. And then my brain puts all the pieces together to form the perception. which is why human perceptions are sometimes not that reliable because we like to fill in missing pieces because we don't like puzzles. Our brain doesn't like puzzles. We like to figure it out. So then we have suffering of change. And the example that the little blurb used is not being able to hold on to what we want. And I think that's a very good example. Our favorite drink. Maybe sometimes we go somewhere and they don't have our favorite drink. That's not, we're not allowed to have what we truly want there. We're not able to hold on to those things that we really want: love, um, family, truth. Sometimes those things slip through our fingers, and that can cause us dukkha. And the argument goes that even under the best circumstances, change is going to occur. I could be the wealthiest person on the planet, but it doesn't change that alteration is going to happen. Now, it may mean that I'm more comfortable with alteration because I have resources, financial resources, to address those changes, but it doesn't mean that I'm exempt from those changes. I'm still going to get old. I'm still going to probably get ill at some point in time. And at some point, death is still going to occur. Even in sci fi, that death thing still creeps up on us no matter what we try to cheat it with. And basically, anything that you experience that is suffering due to change is suffering of suffering because there is going to be an arising of something. There is going to be an aging of something, and then eventually it's going to cease, which would be the equivalent of death. Even pleasurable states, there's sort of the arising of that pleasurable state. There's the maintenance of that state, but it sort of dwindles, and then eventually there is no pleasure anymore. A good example from my economics teacher in high school was Reese's peanut butter cups. I love those things, but I don't eat them anymore because of my dietary restrictions, as someone with Crohn's disease. So there's suffering of change right there. Uh, but every time you eat one, the pleasure that you derive from it is less than the one before. Uh, so that pleasure diminishes as it goes along. I believe it's called the Law of Diminishing Returns, or diminishing. What's it called in economics? What's pleasure called in economics? Utility. The Law of Diminishing Utility, and it sort of would start out. Your utility starts out here, and then it goes down and down and down. It levels out until it is zero or negative. So yes, you can have too much of a good thing apparently, even in the laws of economics. And then there's this pervasive suffering. So this is the third kind of suffering. It's just the inherent stability of even the most pleasant moments. Those moments are not going to last forever. They are not eternal. They are transitory, subject to change, subject to aging. That would be the aging part or the old age part. As those experiences age, it sort of just withers a little bit. And sometimes you know how it's like you turn up the heat on the oven. I mean the stove, not the oven. The stove, so that the water boils, but the frog doesn't, or frog or toad doesn't notice. That's sort of what happens with pleasurable experiences. And then, boom! All of a sudden, wow, that's not pleasurable anymore. What happened? So the other point is there is concern or fear on our part as human beings, as conscious beings, that our experiences or our life is on shaky, shaky ground. Maybe on thin ice. And from a Buddhist perspective, that's not a terrible feeling to have because that is how, from a Buddhist perspective, all conditioned phenomena or everything that is created is on. It's on very shaky ground. It's pleasurable 1 second, and then the next second, we sort of want it to stop. Or we want it to stop, and then when it stops, we feel pleasure. That's sort of how that works, is that unstable ground. What is unpleasant will not be unpleasant forever, although it will feel like it. And the same thing with pleasurable experiences. pleasurable experiences will feel pleasurable until they're not, and then it's not pleasurable anymore. So that's all pervasive suffering. It is that inner core of everything is sort of dukkha, that is a conditioned phenomena. And then there's sort of a more lay person perspective here. So it's under two branches, the physical dukkha and the mental dukkha. So the physical dukkha is the aging, illness, death, and birth part. So uh, a pleasurable state arises, it gets less pleasurable as time goes by, and eventually it ceases, and that would be the death of that particular experience. And then you would have to either up that experience to get more of it, or go to a new experience that would give you the same sort of pleasure. And this is suffering that everyone experiences at one time or another. Bill Gates, as wealthy as he is not immune to this. Who else? Elon Musk, or whatever his last name is. I don't really pay attention to those wealthy people because they're way out of my tax bracket, so I don't really concern myself too much with what they're doing. Unless it's illegal, then I would probably spend more time on their activities. But anyone of any wealth bracket is going to eventually feel those things of aging, illness, death, or even birth. Birth of an unpleasant state, for example. And this can be seen right in front of our eyes when we start losing some of the abilities that we used to have. I used to be a fairly good golfer. One time at my home course, I broke 80. I shot 79. I had, I think it was one birdie, and I had several pars. And I think I only had one double bogey that round. I couldn't do that right now. Even with a bunch of practice, I don't think it would be possible for me to do that right now because some of those abilities that I had when I was younger, I don't have anymore. I used to be able to practice hours upon hours. I don't have that ability anymore. I don't even have the means right now. I mean, practice for me right now is I go out in the parking lot and I take swings. So the circumstances are different. My physical body is different. The skills that my body have are different. So I would need to find my way to come up with a solution to some of those deficiencies that I now have and work on those to sort of counteract what I used to be able to do and those deficiencies that I now have. So that's sort of one way to look at it. And also, when we really think about it, when it comes to this dukkha that we keep talking about, it can only truly be experienced by oneself because we're the ones experiencing it. And there's a story of this king, Kora. Let's see if I can pronounce it right. Korav, Koravya, and he's talking to this monk named Rathapala, and he was asking Rathapala about these summaries of the Dharma. And one of the things that the Venerable asked the king was, "Do you have any chronic illnesses?" Now, this is something I can relate to as someone who has Crohn's disease. You know, I have a chronic disease that, um, sure, many other people have, but I can't. I'm going to get to the point here in a second. And he says, the king says, "Yes, I have a recurring wind illness." And the venerable asks, "Can you order your friends or your servants to feel that pain for you?" And the answer was very quite simply, "No, I cannot, because I can't pass that pain along to them. I have to experience that myself." And I feel like that is sort of the essence of dukkha. Yes, many people experience dukkha, but we can only experience it basically ourselves. We can't force others to experience our dukkha. I mean, we can certainly take actions that bring dukkha to other people, but it doesn't get rid of our dukkha necessarily. And I really shouldn't even be saying that as a traditional Buddhist, but basically, just, we can't force others to experience the dukkha that we're experiencing because we experience that dukkha different than other people might. So I think that's something that is very important. Another message in that sutta is how insatiable life can really be, no matter how wealthy we are or how much power we have. And the Venerable asked the king, what if someone told you, and this was a reliable messenger, that you could conquer more land or more, gather more wealth, more money? And the king says, "Well, I get my army ready, and I go conquer that land." That's the insatiability of life. No matter how much we really have, we're always going to want a little bit more. And that sort of plays into dukkha as well. That's not saying wanting more is a terrible thing. It can be a very motivating thing. But at the same time, we got to look at that with wisdom and be like, is this assisting me in my goals and my journey through life, or is it making it worse? Is it making the experience less pleasurable and I have less peace of mind? So we need to really keep that in our mind. And the same, and with wealth, something that sort of comes up in the suttas as well, and in this sutta too, is that's gonna pass. It's gonna pass as well. When we die, our wealth doesn't go with us when we die. It is passed along to someone else. So holding on to it so tight, is not really something. This is a mental thing. Really, more than anything, is I want more wealth. I wanna keep that wealth for as long as I can, and we hold on to that idea. Some of us do anyway. I don't really worry about wealth, but you know, it's different for each person. It could be I want more power, which money is power, knowledge is power. Whatever phrase you want to use there. I want more power over people. I want to be a supervisor. I want to supervise over everyone and tell them what to do. And then you gotta look in your intention as well when it comes to that. Hashtag just saying. And even in this sutta, the Majjhima Nikaya 82, asks the king, when you were younger, were you not very strong? And the king says, yeah, I was. I was strong as an elephant, but I'm not anymore. That's another thing that sort of passes. Our wealth passes, our strength passes, our pain cannot be passed to others. We have to experience it, but hopefully it doesn't last forever. And that sort of insatiable, I want more thing. That's one of the laws in economics as well. Is the concept of I don't think it's rarity. Rarity is a different term. But we have this constant sort of need for more. Even if we have everything we could ever want, we're going to want more. What's that called? Not rarity. I'll probably think of it at some point. Okay, so that's the physical part. All those things that I just mentioned, they're gonna age. There's gonna be illness, possibly if it's a person or a thing that experiences illness, death, and then birth. So rising of a state, the state sort of levels out, and then it eventually ceases. That sort of deal, and we see that through losing our physical attributes that we used to have. We see that through experiencing pain that only we can experience, that we can't pass to others. The insatiability of, yeah, I have this, but I want this. And then also um, with wealth. Wealth cannot be held on to, it has to be passed along. And then there is the second sort of aspect. So that was the physical aspect, the things that experience birth, aging, illness, and death. Then there's the mental aspect. So the mental part is separation from the pleasant, being united with what is unpleasant, and frustration from desires. And this is a lot of dukkha right here. So separation from what is pleasant. If I'm not able to live in my apartment, I gotta live with partiers, for example. Holy crap, that would be a lot of dukkha for me because I like to have a nice, quiet living environment. So party people are not really my people that I want to live with. I wouldn't mind visiting them if there's a party that I want to go to, but I'm definitely not jumping at the bit, to sort of be like, I want to live with these people, because that's not the type of personality that I have. So if someone said, can't live in your apartment for a week, gotta live with these people, and they have a party every night, I am less than happy. I'm probably getting a bus ticket back to where I grew up because at least there I would have some peace and tranquility compared to living with those partiers Not saying they're bad people. I'm just saying that that is union with what is unpleasant. And it's also separation from what is pleasant, which is having my own space and being able to do what I would like in my own space, which goes back to not being able to hold on to what we want, the suffering of change. Union with the unpleasant, we probably experience this quite a bit. You know, there's someone that we need to work with that we don't necessarily have a high opinion of, and that causes us dukkha. And then there's also frustration from desires. This one is a big one. Um, this is uh, this is one that some of my friends have some experience with. So some of my friends are huge gamers, bigger gamers than I am, and their their goal in life, their ultimate goal in life, is to get a PlayStation 5 or whatever. You know, I really don't think about it. I have a PlayStation 4. As long as there's support for PlayStation 4, I'm good. So their goal is to get a PlayStation 5, but PlayStation 5s are difficult to come by. So they get frustrated because they have this desire to get a PlayStation 5 and it really, it rubs them the wrong way. It's, under their skin because they really want this. And it can be the same thing with other things. Like I want to leave my job, but I can't. That type of situation is also something where you can get frustrated. I want to leave this job. I don't feel supported at this job, but I don't have any other options right now. That can cause frustration. That can cause mental dukkha. And I would argue that physical dukkha and mental dukkha are all sort of co-experiences. We experience mental dukkha, which makes us experience physical dukkha, and also the other way around. If we're in chronic pain, that's going to cause mental dukkha. If we're in chronic mental pain, that's going to cause physical dukkha as well. So they're sort of interlinked. They're not really separate. Even mental dukkha, for example, frustration from desires, for example, that is a mental state. It can arise and it can pass. It's just that clinging thing. That comes up in Buddhism. We hold on to things that we really want, and when we don't get those things, it causes more and more dukkha because we continue to hold on to that thing. It's sort of like what the Buddha said about anger. Your anger is like the hot burning coal that you hold on to very tightly in hopes that you're actually throwing it at the person that you're angry at, or the situation you're angry at, or the object you're angry at. You're just burning yourself up. You're not burning them up. And as a friend and I were discussing earlier this week, one of the greatest pleasures that your enemies can have, if you have any, is for your peace of mind to be completely and utterly destroyed and not having it firm. All right, so that's all I wanted to talk about when it comes to dukkha. So, basic summary version, if something is impermanent, which is most things, the only thing that is not impermanent from a Buddhist context is nirvana. It is it's just right at the core of this thing, if there was such a thing. Ourselves, the human body, or the human experience. It's dukkha. We don't recognize it sometimes until things get really bad. But that's dukkha right there. Impermanence is dukkha. Dukkha is impermanence. And dukkha is a lot of things, but there's a very strong connection between those things. And in the next talk, we're going to talk about not self. Now, this is a Buddhist teaching that you're going to need to wrap your head around. And I'm going to try my best to make it very simplified because it's not as simple as some people and some teachers try to make it out to be. And we're going to talk about that in the context of what constitutes a self. So, in the Buddhist context, that's the five aggregates. Uh, and I think that the five aggregates are a very good summary. All right, so until next week, everyone, take care of yourselves, and I'll talk to you soon. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Bye for now, everyone.